fighting love. Let's fighting love. この歌ちょっとバカ。わけがわからない。英語がめちゃくちゃ。大丈夫 We do it all the time. Hey hey let's go 喧嘩する。大切なものを protect my vows. どこが悪い So let's fighting. Let's fighting love. Let's fighting love.
Red Dawn was made in 1984, and the movie is about a fictional invasion of the United States by the then Soviet Union. The movie revolves around the premise that the United States, in this world, is not very powerful, and therefore is very vulnerable to a conventional invasion by the Soviet Union and its Cuban allies. The movie itself opens with one of the most shocking scenes probably in movie history. Right away, it starts out with an attack on a school as Soviet paratroopers parachute down, right into the heartland of the United States. I found this movie when I first saw it way back in the 90s to be very interesting, and I've never seen a movie quite like it. It deals with the idea that a lot of Americans cannot really comprehend or appreciate. That is, being invaded by another country and having that country occupy your land, occupy your home, killing your people, forcing you to bow down to their will. It's sort of like watching a World War II movie about places that were invaded by foreign armies, such as in Poland, Czechoslovakia, France during the Second World War. You get that World War II feeling when you watch this movie, and it really does bring home the idea of what would it be like if the United States were invaded in that way by a foreign army, and they tried to conquer us and take over our country. The main plot revolves around a group of high school teenagers that are basically forced to form a resistance army against the Soviets, and they take to the hills, and at first they're trying to survive and trying to just make it through this invasion. But as the story progresses, they become sort of a guerrilla army, and they start to take on the Russians, and they start to fight back. They start to do small attacks against the Russians, and then they escalate them. They sabotage their supply lines, their means of communication. They start killing their soldiers, destroying their tanks, etc. And it's very much like the French resistance in World War II, or in many of the other countries that were occupied by Nazi Germany. It takes on that resistance aspect. They call themselves the Wolverines because their high school football team is supposed to be named the Wolverines. And so, yeah, I mean, the aspect of, the idea, I should say, of teenagers from a high school with no military training suddenly being able to take on the Russian army is a little far-fetched, to say the least. But it didn't bother me. I can sort of suspend my disbelief a little bit in that because I can think, well, these people have been out there for a while, fighting for survival, and with each time they take on the Russians, they gain combat experience and things like that. So I'm able to suspend my disbelief a little bit. And I can imagine that, yeah, maybe these people could, in time, form a good military guerrilla group and be able to take on these highly trained Russian soldiers. And like I said, it's a little far-fetched, but it's not so much that it takes me out of the movie. And unlike a lot of movies made in the 1980s, this movie, some of the main characters, actually most of them, end up dying, as you would have in a real-life situation if you were under an occupation and you had to face combat every day. People do die. They lose many of their comrades. But eventually they're able to drive out the Soviet Union and help liberate the United States. But it comes at a cost. Many people die. Civilians are killed by the Russian soldiers in retaliation for the Wolverines' continued resistance and guerrilla attacks on their army. It sort of mirrors the same situation that the Nazi Germans did during World War II. Sometimes they would carry out executions and retaliation on the civilian population in order to quell any further resistance or to punish the resistance for fighting against their army of occupation. In the end, they're able to, save the United States and the Russians withdraw, but not before a lot of lives are lost. So the movie is really a lot more realistic than you might think. And it's just a really interesting film. It's very much a product of its time. However, its themes of war, resistance, loss, those things are timeless because there will always be wars, there will always be invasions and invaders and people who resist and things like that. So in that respect, the movie it will always be timeless. And with all that being said, I think it's time to get right to our score. Okay, so Red Dawn gets a big thumbs up from me. This is a great action movie, a great dramatic movie, if I may say so. It's got interesting characters, an interesting storyline. I never got bored watching the original Red Dawn, made in 1984. It's just a great movie all around, and I think anybody who loves action, who loves movies, will definitely enjoy Red Dawn. Also, if you really do enjoy Red Dawn, you will almost certainly love the video game Freedom Fighters, made for PlayStation 2 and the original Xbox. Even though the game has nothing to do with the original Red Dawn or the remake, it revolves around the same premise of the Soviet Union invading the United States. And it's a great action game, and I almost want to say it's really perfect to have with this movie. If you get Red Dawn and you like it, I would suggest looking up the video game Freedom Fighters for PlayStation 2 and the original Xbox. Even though the game is pretty old, it's still great, especially when you watch it with Red Dawn. So anyway, that's my review. Thanks for watching, everybody. We'll see you next time. Bye for now.